How we doing, everybody? Hope everybody had a great weekend. I went fishing with my son on the ocean. We've only been fishing so far down by the lakes and on some rivers, and we've caught nothing at all. And my son was losing hope that we would ever catch a fish. I said, I know, let's go in the ocean. And we did. We caught a fish. We caught many fish. We got some sand dabs. We got some red snapper. We got some sculpins. We got a sea bass. So fish for dinner tonight. So we had a great time. But of course, you're not here to hear about my fishing escapades because I am not a very good fisherman. That's a fact. In fact, those fish may not have even been caught by me. It might have been somebody on the boat that took pity on us. But still, I digress. We're here to talk about the circus sideshow that is Triller Fight Club. Listen, if you're a fight fan, you know what happened last night. We had Vitor taking on Anderson Silva, and we had Vitor Belfort taking on the legendary Evander Holyfield, the real deal himself. Now, coming into this fight, a lot of people had a lot of reservations about it. Obviously, Evander Holyfield, 58 years old. California Commission wouldn't sanction him. They wouldn't license him. So they moved it to Florida and all the rest of it. Now, listen, we're going to get into that in a minute, but we're going to start with Anderson Silva taking on Vitor. Now, this fight was contested at a weight of 195 pounds. And I thought coming into this one, there's no way Vitor's going to make 195 pounds. He's a big light heavyweight. And there was a video on last week where he was down to 215. He said, I'm feeling great. I'm down to 215 pounds. I'm going to make the weight limit of 195. Well, if you're already dehydrated to 215, he's still 20 pounds away. 20 pounds is a lot of water to cut, so it came as no surprise to anybody, I don't think, that he never made weight. And it was the first time in his career that he missed weight, came in at 200 pounds, and I think he gave 20% of his purse to Anderson Silva. So anyway, all that aside, let's get into the fight. Now, prior to the fight, Vitor said, I'm a fighter. I'm coming to punch a hole in his head. He's not going to, have any success with that Wing Chun bullshit that he's going to try with me. I'm a fighter. Well, listen, that is true. Vitor is a fighter. You can't take that away from him. At his age, 46 years old, Anderson also 46 years old. Vitor's been around the block for a long, long time. You cannot deny that the man's a fighter. But Anderson Silva is also a fighter, but Anderson's also a martial artist. And Anderson Silva is one of the greatest martial artists that the human race has ever seen. He is a modern day Bruce Lee. I'm telling you, Anderson Silva truly is one of the greatest of all time. And that is just a fact. That is the reason that when I fought Anderson Silva, I left no stone unturned. I was the most disciplined that I was in any training camp. I always wanted to fight Anderson when he was the champ and when he lost the belt, and I finally got a chance to face him. Still, for me, that was my world championship. At that point, I hadn't fought for the belt. So for me fighting Anderson, I'm like, okay, well, if this is as good as it gets for me facing Anderson Silva in London at the O2 Arena, that's a big deal. So I was so motivated. I was so disciplined going into that training camp because you have to be. Now, listen, Vitor said he's going to go out there and he's going to punch a hole in his head and he's a fighter and all the rest of it. And he ain't going to use none of that Wing Chun bollocks on him. Well, that is not the way you fight Anderson Silva. You can't go in against Anderson Silva and be aggressive. You can't go in and just go, I'm just going to swing, I'm going to go crazy and I'm going to catch him. No way. Anderson Silva's timing is impeccable. His reflexes are cat-like, urban cat-like, right? And the diversity of attacks that Anderson Silva has is mind-blowing. Now, granted, this is a boxing match, so not as many tools, but still the hands we saw against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., who's a decent boxer in his own right. Granted, Chavez Jr. has, some substance abuse issues, apparently. Apparently, he's a party animal. It's probably a lot of fun to hang out with on a Saturday night, but still in the boxing ring, maybe that limits him somewhat. But he did have a good career. He's having a good career. And Anderson Silva against him at 46 years old looked amazing. It looked like the Anderson Silva of old. So Vitor should have known coming into this fight against Anderson Silva that you have to be strategic. You got to be technical. You can't just go in there and fight on emotion and pure aggression. And Jason Perillo, who is Vitor's coach, who's my coach, he's the guy that drilled that message home for me. He got me in charge of my emotions. My emotions used to rule me in almost every aspect of my life, to be honest. I was far too emotional. I would lose my temper, and that would affect my personal life. That would affect me in my day-to-day. And of course, it would affect me in the ring or in the cage. And Jason worked on that hard with me. He said, you can't go in there acting on emotion. You've got to be cool, calm, and collected. And certainly against somebody like Anderson Silva, you have to be. When you look at Anderson Silva, he's so calm in there and he plays games with people and he punks people, but that's because he's so confident. Like when I fought him and I knew Anderson was going to play these mind games, at one point in the fight when I fought Anderson, he just goes up against the back of the fence and puts his hands down, completely defenseless, right? And I'm like, no, you're not doing that to me, buddy. I am not standing there with you with your hands down by the side, leaning against the fence, making an absolute mockery of me because you're a defenseless opponent there. That makes a fool out of me. So I thought, I'm not getting sucked into those traps. So I backed off in that and I just put my hands down by the waist also. I'm like, well, when you decide to fight, I'll fight. And then he did. And then boom, it's back on. Remember, Anderson Silva did the same thing with Damian Maia, helping him up off the floor. He did it against Stephan Bonner many times. That's what he does. Anderson does this. He lulls you into a false sense of security. He plays mind games. Whatever it is, he's the master at it. He's very, very good. The point I'm making through all of this is that Tito went out at the start of the fight and he was aggressive, and that's all well and good. But Anderson allowed himself, make no mistake, he allowed himself to be backed into the corner of the ring and he played the old rope-a-dope like Muhammad Ali did. He covered up very, very well. The head movement was beautiful. Tito was throwing a lot of shots, and he was emptying the tank a little bit. And he threw a long combination. And fair enough to Tito, one or two of those shots did connect, but most of them missed. But he threw a long combination, right? And he punched himself out. And then by the end, he threw 3 left hooks in succession and they were slow. And I'm not saying that to insult Tito. No, that's not what I'm doing here. I'm just talking about what I saw from a strategic point of view. Anderson backed him up, let him play the old rope-a-dope. He punched himself out a bit. And he punched himself out because the first ones were fast, but those last 3, 1, 2, 3, that's kind of the speed they were at. And Anderson Silva, this whole time, he's waiting. He's waiting, he's covering up, he's moving his head, he's doing all this, he's waiting. And he's like, oh, look at this. And then 1, 2, he's like, sees his opening, boom, right hook, cracks him, knocks him off balance, follows it up, and Tito hit the deck unconscious. And I gotta say, for Anderson Silva to still be doing this at this level, at 46 years old, after the career that he had in mixed martial arts, we all know, but the fall from grace that he had, he lost a few fights and then he ended up getting knocked out against Uriah Hall. It looked like it was over, but he really has a rebirth. And as a fan of Anderson Silva, and make no mistake, I am a fan of Anderson Silva. You have to be. How can you not respect the body of work that he had? And also the way that he carries himself. Of course, he had the little thing with the steroids and whatnot, and you all know my view on that. And trust me, when I fought him, I let him know my thoughts on that. Make no mistake, I punished him for it. I made a fool out of him. I insulted him to the highest degree. But still, that's water under the bridge, shall we say. And Saturday night, Anderson Silva looked absolutely fantastic. So well done to Anderson. Still life in the old dog yet. What's next for Anderson Silva? I don't know, but every part of my body says that if Jake Paul really wants a tough test, then Anderson Silva is your man. Look no further. You think you've got what it takes and you want to pick off somebody that's not in their prime. Anderson Silva's 46, many knockouts now, and he's long in the tooth, and he's a battle-worn veteran. But Anderson Silva will give you everything you don't want, Jake Paul, so be careful. Anyway, congrats, Anderson. Moving on. Main event, if you can call it that. Sideshow main event, circus act, whatever it is. Vitor Belfort coming back and fighting Evander Holyfield at 58 years old. We know the commission didn't allow it in California and all the rest of it. And then they changed it from a professional bout to an exhibition bout. Okay? And a lot of people were worried about Evander Holyfield being the age that he is. And then, of course, when it came to the open workouts, it really did look like Evander was in slow motion. It really did. And I was like, oh, man, okay, this doesn't look good. But you never know. He's been around forever. One of the most legendary boxers. Maybe the timing will compensate for the lack of speed. Maybe the power will compensate for that as well. But that is not what we saw. Evander went out there. He looked so slow. Fair play to Vitor Belfort, right? He did look fast. He looked like, for some reason, somehow he hit puberty again for like the 4th time in his life. His muscles were growing back. No doubt he had spots on his back as well. And he looked fast. It was all back. I guarantee he was on steroids. He was on everything under the sun. Now, fair play, I guarantee that Evander Holyfield was as well. You don't look like Evander Holyfield at 58 years like that unless you get a good doctor and you got an ass like a dartboard. It's as simple as that. So they were both on it, so whatever, you know. But when it comes down to the fight, if you're Vitor Belfort and you're going up against an old age pensioner, right, pretty much, and a legend of the fight game, and it's an exhibition bout. If it's an exhibition bout, come on. Take it easy on the guy a little bit, because it's clearly obvious when he fell through the ropes, right? We don't see that from boxers in their prime. And then he drops him and puts him down, right? And he's back on the feet. It's like, okay, there's the time now, Vitor, to maybe step off the gas a little bit and have a little play. It's clear you're, at this point, better than him because of your athletic ability, because you're faster, and because he's 58 years old and he's old news and he's got too many miles on the clock. Okay, he's a broken down old vehicle. He's conking out right before your very eyes. Take it easy. Play the game. You were fighting like this was personal. Evander Holyfield hasn't done anything to you. Give the people what they pay to see. Whoever parted ways with their money on Saturday night to watch that shit show, give them what they pay to see. Give them an exhibition match. You were fighting him like he insulted your mother. You fought him like you were Tyrone Woodley and he talked shit about Mama Woodley. Do you know what I mean? My God, leave poor Evander alone. Have a little exhibition match. But you didn't do that. You went out there, you blitzed him. Fair enough. You got a first round stoppage against over an old guy. Over an old guy that can't clearly fight anymore. And then you celebrated like you just knocked out Mike Tyson in his prime. Okay? Now listen, everyone knows my thoughts on Vitor Belfort, so maybe I'm going a little hard. But that's what I saw. And I think that's what everybody else saw. Now, fair play to Evander Holyfield. He's a tough guy. Afterwards, he said the fight was stopped too soon. Said he still had plenty of fight left in him. And he disagreed with the stoppage. Well, that's what all fighters say. That's what we always say. When I fought Vitor Belfort, by the way, and I was on the floor, I got dropped with a head kick. And I lost my eye later, but when I was on the floor taking punches, I said that was stopped early as well. That's what we do. That's what we say. Anyway, congratulations to everyone at the weekend. Vitor Belfort also calling out Jake Paul for 25-30 million. I don't think Jake Paul's going to take that fight. I don't think Jake Paul will take an Anderson Silva fight. They are past their prime MMA fighters, but they clearly proved on Saturday night they are too much for a Jake Paul or a Logan Paul. But still, we'll wait and see what happens. But listen, thanks for watching, everybody. I appreciate your time. Hope you're all well. Ring that bell, hit that subscribe, and I'll be back with another video tomorrow. Take care.